In the world of professional wrestling, few figures have ever looked as terrifying, as intense, or as unstoppable as Sycho Sid. Standing at nearly 7 feet tall with a bodybuilder's frame and a wild, unhinged stare, Sid was built to be a wrestling icon. And for a time he was. In the early 90s and mid-90s, Sid headlined major pay-per-views, went toe-to-toe with legends like Hulk Hogan, Shawn Michaels, and The Undertaker, and even walked out of WrestleMania with the WWF Championship around his waist. He was the embodiment of chaos, powerbombing opponents into the mat with ruthless aggression, shouting his maniacal promos into the camera, and commanding the spotlight with an aura of sheer danger. But somewhere along the way, the bright lights faded. The cheers died down. Sid's name slowly slipped into the shadows of wrestling history, rarely mentioned alongside other greats. His fall wasn't the kind that happens overnight. It was a slow, strange unraveling, filled with missed chances, backstage drama, bizarre behavior, and finally, tragedy. Today, many fans remember the name Sycho Sid, but few know the full story behind the man who once ruled the ring. How did someone so dominant, so unforgettable, become one of wrestling's most overlooked tragedies? What happened after that horrifying leg injury? Why didn't WWE celebrate him like they did others? This is the story of a giant who seemed destined to be a legend, but somehow ended up a ghost. Stick around, because you're about to hear everything, raw, real, and maybe even heartbreaking. Before he was Sycho Sid, before he was powerbombing superstars in packed arenas, he was just a kid from West Memphis, Arkansas, named Sid Udi. At first glance, you might think he was born for the spotlight. Towering even in his teenage years, with freakish strength and athleticism, Sid had all the physical tools to be a force in almost any sport. But it wasn't football or basketball that grabbed him, it was wrestling. And once he stepped between the ropes, it was like he'd found his calling. Sid's journey into the business started in the late 1980s under a mask. He was introduced to wrestling as Lord Humongous, a character ripped straight out of a Mad Max movie. He didn't talk, didn't smile. He just destroyed people. The gimmick caught some attention in the southern wrestling circuits. But what really turned heads was Sid himself. Promoters and veterans immediately noticed the size, the look, and the presence. He didn't need fancy moves. He didn't need to speak. His sheer size did all the talking. That's when he made the jump to WCW under a new name, Sid Vicious. And this time, he wasn't hiding behind a mask. Now, fans saw the real deal. A snarling powerhouse who looked like he could crush skulls for fun. WCW booked him as a monster, often pairing him with legends like the Four Horsemen. Even when he was green in the ring, fans bought into the character. His matches were short and explosive. You didn't need 10 minutes of mat wrestling when Sid could walk in and level a guy in 30 seconds. He became known for his explosive intensity. His eyes burned with something unhinged. His promos were unpredictable, sometimes rambling, sometimes chilling, but always memorable. The industry was watching, and so was Vince McMahon. The WWF soon came calling, seeing dollar signs in the imposing figure. Sid had carved a path of destruction across the South, and now it was time for the biggest stage of them all. But before he even arrived, the buzz was real. A man who looked like a horror villain was about to enter Vince's world of superheroes, and fans were hyped. Before we continue with the video and my further explanation about the problems with Sid's wrestling downfall, I'd like to ask for your help. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers, so I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe and support me. Okay, let's continue. When Sid Udi stepped into the WWF in 1991 under the name Sid Justice, it was like unleashing a monster into a superhero comic book. He had the physique of a bodybuilder and the rage of a villain ripped straight from a nightmare. Vince McMahon instantly saw dollar signs. Sid wasn't just big, he looked like a champion. And in the world of early 90s wrestling, that was half the battle. Sid's debut came with fanfare. He was presented as a babyface, a good guy, appointed the special guest referee for the match between Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior at SummerSlam. Fans cheered his arrival. But underneath that surface, something darker was brewing. Sid's demeanor, his glare, and his outbursts hinted that he wouldn't stay the good guy for long. Sure enough, by early 1992, the shift came. Sid turned heel and set his sights on the biggest name in wrestling, Hulk Hogan. Their feud culminated at WrestleMania 8, where the two giants clashed in a main event that promised chaos. The match itself didn't go as planned. Papa Shango missed his cue, and the ending fell apart. But the fans didn't care. Sid felt like a main event star. Even in a messy finish, his presence carried the weight of the moment. But Sid didn't last long in WWF. Just months after WrestleMania, he left the company over reported disputes and dissatisfaction. Still, his reputation didn't fade. In WCW, he returned under his old name, Sid Vicious, and picked up right where he left off. He teamed with Vader, feuded with Sting, and again found himself in the title scene. No matter where he went, promoters saw him as a threat, and fans recognized the danger he brought. In 1995, Sid made his way back to WWF, this time fully embracing his dark side. Rebranded as Sycho Sid, he leaned into the chaos. His promos became more unhinged, his actions more brutal. And in this new Attitude Era adjacent world, it worked. The audience was no longer drawn to clean-cut heroes. They wanted madness, unpredictability. Sid gave them that in spades. One of his most iconic moments came in 1996 when he defeated Shawn Michaels for the WWF Championship at Survivor Series. Madison Square Garden erupted. This wasn't a technical masterpiece. It was raw, aggressive, and fueled by emotion. Fans who had booed him a year earlier were now on their feet cheering his victory. For a moment, Sid had climbed the mountain again. He would go on to defend the title against top stars and headline another WrestleMania, this time facing The Undertaker at WrestleMania 13. Losing the title didn't dull his aura. He was still a destructive force, a champion who fit the mold of an old-school powerhouse. Sid's time at the top wasn't always smooth. He was in and out of the picture, but every time he returned, he brought that same terrifying energy. Whether it was WCW or WWF, he was booked like a monster, and he lived up to that billing. For a guy with limited in-ring skill compared to technicians like Bret Hart, Sid knew how to connect with a crowd. It wasn't about wrestling holds. It was about presence. Sid had it. And when he powerbombed a rival into the mat, the whole arena felt it. He wasn't just part of wrestling. He was a threat to everyone in it. For all his dominance in the ring, Sid Udy was no stranger to controversy behind the scenes. His career was filled with sudden exits, unexpected absences, and a growing reputation as someone who was difficult to manage. While fans saw a wrecking machine, those backstage often described a more complicated figure. Sid was known for walking out on companies without warning. After headlining WrestleMania 8, he abruptly left WWF amid reports of frustration over how he was being used. Rumors spread that he believed he should have been the next big star, and when plans didn't align with that vision, he packed his bags. This became a pattern. His time in WCW was equally chaotic. In 1993, Sid was poised to get a major push when a hotel room incident derailed everything. During a heated altercation with fellow wrestler Arn Anderson while on tour in the UK, things escalated quickly, too quickly. The argument turned violent, and both men ended up with stab wounds from a pair of scissors. The story shocked the wrestling world and permanently scarred Sid's image. WCW had no choice but to release him, and his career took a massive hit. Despite these incidents, promotions kept bringing him back. Why? Because Sid had something you couldn't teach: presence. But even his strongest supporters couldn't deny the inconsistency. He'd commit to big matches, then vanish. He'd be set up for long-term storylines, only to pull out or clash with management. This instability meant he was often passed over in favor of more reliable talent. By the time the late 90s rolled around, Sid was seen as a gamble. His size and character were undeniable, but behind the curtain, trust was fading. Promoters couldn't count on him to stick around. Other wrestlers were wary of his unpredictable nature. Some said he was obsessed with control. Others believed he simply lost interest when he wasn't in the spotlight. Another odd factor was his well-known love of softball. Yes, softball. It became an ongoing joke among fans and wrestlers alike. Sid would reportedly prioritize local softball games over major wrestling events. Whether true or exaggerated, the rumors didn't help his reputation. To many, it looked like he didn't take wrestling seriously enough. All these elements chipped away at his legacy. While his character remained fearsome on camera, the chaos behind the curtain slowly dragged him down. Promoters hesitated, opportunities dwindled. Sid was becoming a man too dangerous to ignore, but too unstable to trust. He wasn't fading due to a lack of ability or popularity. He was fading because the business around him was losing faith. The cracks in the armor were growing wider, and soon they'd shatter completely. On January 14, 2001, at WCW's Sin pay-per-view, Sid Vicious stepped into the ring for what should have been just another main event. It turned out to be a nightmare, one of the most gruesome injuries ever witnessed in professional wrestling. Fans still talk about it with horror, not because of the match, but because of what happened in a split second that changed everything. During the match, Sid climbed to the second rope, a rare move for a man of his size. He leapt off, attempting a simple big boot, but as he came down, his left leg snapped under the weight of his landing. The sight was disturbing. His tibia and fibula shattered instantly. The lower leg bent grotesquely in the wrong direction. The broadcast quickly cut away, but the damage had been done. Backstage, panic set in. Wrestlers and medical staff rushed to the ring. Sid lay screaming in pain, his face twisted in agony. The injury wasn't just severe, it was career-threatening. Surgery followed, including the insertion of a steel rod into his leg. Doctors doubted he'd ever walk the same again, let alone wrestle. For Sid, it was more than physical. His entire identity had been built around being a destroyer, an unstoppable force. Now, he was immobilized. The man who once powerbombed giants was confined to a hospital bed, facing months of recovery and rehabilitation. WCW was sold to WWE shortly after, and Sid was left without a home in the wrestling world. The fallout extended beyond the ring. Sid sued WCW, claiming the company had forced him to perform the move that led to the injury. Whether that was true or not, it highlighted a recurring theme in Sid's career: conflict with authority and a sense of being misunderstood. The leg injury not only ended his WCW run, it shattered his image as an invincible beast. He was no longer the towering enigma who terrified opponents. Now, he was a man whose career had ended not with a title loss, but with a scream and a stretcher. That moment, burned into the minds of fans, became a turning point, one that marked the beginning of his long fade into obscurity. Despite some appearances in wrestling later, he would never reclaim his place at the top. No championship, no storyline, no feud could erase the image of that fall. It wasn't just a physical break, it was symbolic. The unbreakable had finally broken. Sid's downfall wasn't because of age or declining talent. It was the result of one horrifying moment that nobody saw coming. And tragically, it became the defining moment of his career for many. After the leg injury in 2001, Sid Vicious all but vanished from the mainstream wrestling spotlight. For someone who had once stood in packed arenas as a world champion, his exit was quiet, almost eerie. There was no farewell tour, no emotional goodbye. He simply disappeared, another fallen titan in a business that often moves on without looking back. The road to recovery was long and brutal. Multiple surgeries and intense physical therapy consumed his life. Even as his body slowly healed, the wrestling world had shifted. WWE had absorbed WCW. New stars were taking over, and the landscape no longer had a place for Sid's brand of rage-filled chaos. But still, the itch to return never left him. Incredibly, despite what doctors predicted, Sid attempted several comebacks. In 2004, he made a surprise appearance in a Canadian promotion, looking noticeably smaller but still explosive in short bursts. Over the next few years, he popped up on independent shows across the U.S., throwing powerbombs and cutting promos that reminded fans of the monster he once was. Every time he returned, there was buzz. Could Sid really be back? Then, in 2012, he shocked fans by showing up on WWE's Monday Night Raw during their Legends Night series. It was a surreal moment. The man once thought to be finished walked out to a huge pop and quickly squashed an opponent. For a brief moment, the wrestling world believed in miracles, but it was fleeting. WWE never offered a long-term contract, and Sid quietly drifted away again. Outside the ring, Sid lived a life far removed from the fame of his earlier years. He retreated to his roots in Arkansas and, as strange as it sounds, threw himself into softball. Yes, softball. It wasn't a rumor or a joke. He was obsessed with the sport and even joined multiple leagues. Some said it was his escape, others believed it filled the void wrestling had left behind. Over the years, Sid became somewhat of an enigma. He would occasionally give interviews, short, often vague, and never fully explain his departure from the business. Some believed he still held bitterness over how things ended. Others thought he simply couldn't adapt to the new era. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. What's clear is that Sid never got the farewell or the redemption arc many others received. While legends like Ric Flair, Shawn Michaels, and The Undertaker were honored with documentaries, Hall of Fame inductions, and career retrospectives, Sid's legacy remained untouched. No WWE Network special, no career-spanning tribute, just silence. And it hurt his standing with newer fans. A generation grew up watching wrestling without ever knowing what Sid had once meant to the industry. He became a trivia question. Who did Undertaker beat at WrestleMania 13? Instead of a celebrated figure. Sid's story after wrestling is one of isolation and missed opportunity. He had the physical tools, the charisma, the unforgettable look. But he also had a career marked by instability and a post-injury life that never quite found its rhythm. The spotlight dimmed, and Sid didn't chase it anymore. Sid Udy passed away in 2024 after a private battle with cancer. The news was sudden. Wrestling fans around the world were shocked, not just by the fact that he had died, but by how quietly it happened. There were no big headlines on WWE's official site. No tribute videos aired during Raw or SmackDown. Some wrestlers posted messages on social media, but overall, the reaction felt muted for a man who had once main-evented WrestleMania. That silence said everything. Sid wasn't just gone, he had been forgotten. This wasn't a man with a string of scandals or an irredeemable past. He wasn't banned or blackballed. He was a former world champion, a headliner, a name that once sold tickets and carried entire shows. And yet, when the wrestling world should have celebrated his legacy, it barely looked up. So, what happened? Part of it was timing. Sid's prime came during transitional years in wrestling. He rose just after the Hogan era and just before the Attitude Era boom. He was a monster in a time when audiences were shifting toward reality-based characters. Another reason was the erratic nature of his career. No long runs, no strong loyalty to one company. He drifted in and out, and in the process, he lost narrative momentum. And let's face it, wrestling history is often written by the companies that survive. WWE chooses who gets remembered, who gets statues, who becomes immortal. Sid didn't play the political game. He didn't stick around long enough to earn that institutional praise. He wasn't part of the family. But fans remember the ones who watched him crush opponents with that devastating powerbomb, the ones who saw him go toe-to-toe with legends and never blink, the ones who felt the electricity he brought every time he entered an arena. Sid Udy's story isn't just about success or failure. It's about how the wrestling world sometimes lets its giants fall in silence. He deserved more, a final spotlight, a proper goodbye, a place in the Hall of Fame. In the end, Sycho Sid was a man built for greatness, haunted by what could have been. His tragedy wasn't that he failed, it's that when he left, few were watching. Sid Udy's story isn't just the tale of a wrestler. It's a reminder of how quickly fame can fade and how unforgiving the spotlight can be. Here was a man who checked every box: size, intensity, charisma, and presence. He wasn't a technical master, but he didn't need to be. Sid commanded attention the moment he walked through the curtain. In a business built on larger-than-life personalities, he was one of the largest. And yet, when the credits rolled on his career, there was no tribute, no ceremony, no final farewell. He simply faded into the background. The industry moved on, and Sid became another name in the long list of forgotten stars who gave everything but received little in return. His story forces us to ask tough questions. What does it take to be remembered in professional wrestling? Is it championships, longevity, political loyalty behind the scenes? Because if it's about raw impact, if it's about unforgettable moments, then Sid earned his place among the greats. But maybe his legacy lies in the silence, in those brief flashes of greatness that still live in the memories of fans who watched him dominate the ring. Maybe the tragedy isn't that Sid was forgotten, but that the industry never gave him the platform to truly thrive long-term. He was lightning in a bottle, unpredictable, volatile, powerful, but never fully understood. For every wrestler who gets the red carpet treatment in retirement, there's another like Sid, whose contributions are quietly overlooked. And that's something the wrestling world needs to reckon with. Because legends aren't always the ones with the most airtime. They're often the ones who left the deepest scars on the mat. So now, we turn to you. After hearing Sid's journey, from towering champion to tragic figure, what do you think? Was Sycho Sid overlooked by the industry? Or was his story always destined to end this way? Let us know in the comments. We want to hear your take. And before you go, if you appreciated this deep dive into wrestling history, please consider subscribing. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and your support helps us tell more stories like this, ones that deserve to be remembered. Thanks for watching, and until next time, respect the legends, even the forgotten ones, even the forgotten ones, even the forgotten ones.